All right. Happy Thursday. So hope everybody's having a good week. You found yourself on the January 21st edition of Static Analysis Office Hours. The very first item on the agenda is from Taylor. So floor is yours, sir.
So, one of the first things we wanted to do was start more openly communicating about what we're focusing on. And we have some really exciting things kicking off the year. So, I want to review our 13.9 plan. The issue is there. Check it out. We do these planning issues generally a few weeks before a milestone starts. We're trying to open them earlier. So, there'll be issues open very soon through 14.0. But basically, this is an overview of what we're looking through. So I want to touch on a couple of these things because there's very strategic directions that we're starting to open up that will inform where we're going in 14.0. So to start, we're continuing to improve the core experience for non-ultimate users. So SAST and secret detection is available to everybody at GitLab. However, it does not include vulnerability management. So when you're looking at a merge request, you don't get all of the vulnerabilities listed out and interactable. You have to interact with the JSON object artifact. So we're making that more improved. You can now download that artifact from the MR page. As part of 13.9, we're working to enable more core customers to both understand that SAST and secret detection is available to them and then get it turned on. So that is our core our configuration page for security functionality that will expose the ability for people to create a merge request to turn on SAST. It'll also include an overview of all of the individual scanners with a call to action to upgrade. So there's a little bit more awareness and ability to get things turned on. It includes links to documentation to know that things are available. So that's one improvement that we're making for all users. Next, we're to the point where we have a lot of analyzers. We've got about 15 different open source tools that power our SAST engines today. About 10 of those are what we call linters, which are more simplified security tools that just lint code. So it's looking at static analysis and finding security vulnerabilities. That simple approach is something that an open source project called SimGrep does and has a more structured and streamlined manner to run those queries, write your own queries. There's a whole community around SimGrep already. So we're looking to replace our linter analyzers potentially with SimGrep. So in 13.9, we're going to focus on making sure that's the right decision and evaluating what that will actually look like for us firsthand. So I think we'll either be doing a Python or our JavaScript analyzer, which is Brakeman or ESLint. I think we'll probably go with Python, which is Brakeman. Or no, I'm sorry, Bandit. It's Bandit. Yes, Bandit. See, I can't keep them all straight. So that's something that we're starting to look into. What's really interesting is that SimGrep is something that comes up with customers quite a lot. We've had many customers directly ask us for support for SimGrep. So this opens up a new potential for customers to write more flexible rules. So very exciting there. Next, we've got our major deprecations and upcoming removals in 14.0. There's a good sized list of things that we're going to be removing and deprecating for 14.0. Our plan right now is that in 13.10, we will do most of those deprecations. We'll announce them in 13.9. It includes some variable changes. If you click through that 14.0 issue, you can find all of those details there. More to come with the 13.9 release post, which will have all of those deprecations in it with the removal plan for 14.0. Next, we've got some improvement in our vulnerability tracking. So if you think about the way that our security scanners work, they identify vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities today are just a specific line in a specific file. That's how we track vulnerabilities as they move around. That is not flawless. Code moves around, it moves files, it shifts up, it shifts down. We can occasionally lose track of vulnerabilities. So we're working on a new fingerprinting engine, which will basically make it easier for us to track vulnerabilities around. We're code naming it Tagger. It's an internal name, but basically it will improve the accuracy of our tracking engine. So that's something that we're exploring in this next release as well. We're not fully shifting over to that engine yet. We're going to run it side by side with what we're doing today, make sure that its results are better than what we're doing. And then in a future release, we'll shift to that. So really exciting things that I think really start to illustrate our focus on data quality and improvements for our security scanners. So that is really what the entire focus of this year is going to be, is improving our data quality, accuracy, reducing false positives. So yeah, we're well on our way. So that is a quick overview of our 13.9 plan. Any questions before we move on? Cool. All right.
Actually, I do have one question.
Sure.
I was wondering if this is something we're going to be actively dogfooding.
Absolutely. We have already done a lot of work to better dog food our security features within GitLab. I very much want us to do this same thing as we start trying out these new tools and testing the data quality. If we have projects, and this is kind of how we're evaluating which of the analyzers we want to go and test some of these ideas with, what makes it easier for us to get data on. One of the reasons we're looking at ESLint and Bandit is because it's one of our top used scanners. And so it gives us more data to go off of. So that's absolutely something we're thinking about. Bandit, Breakman, same thing? Not really. Okay,
right.
so I think we can move on to general Q&A.
Yeah, John, you got the question. So floor is yours for this multi-part question, sir.
Yes. So first of all, hi everybody. My first time meeting most of you here. So I'm part of a group of SAs. We're currently working on this idea of performing SAST analysis for a portion of a monorepo. And the idea is that you may have a team working, we've got a large monorepo, many different projects and directories. And as a team, we may be responsible for only one project or directory within that monorepo. And so we're not really interested in the SAST findings from other parts of the monorepo. That was the idea that we set out with at the start. And so we kind of focused on spot bugs because I think Daniel shared a demo of monorepo support for spot bugs, but I think it became obvious that what Daniel was kind of demonstrating there was really the ability for spot bugs to be able to run analysis across every single project or directory within a monorepo, which was kind of, I think that's my understanding of it. And that was really kind of like the inverse of what we were trying to do. So anyway, we've put together this POC, it's working. We have a customized spot bugs analyzer that only scans that portion of the repo that has changed. And so happy days. But as we were going through this, it kind of raised some questions. First of all, we were kind of thinking, well, actually, is what we're trying to do here wrong? Because if you think about how the vulnerability findings are, surfaced within the MR, if you're a team that's working on more than one project within that repo, and let's say you make a change to project A and you get the findings in the MR, which is great. That's fine because you're just really focusing on those changes you've made. However, if you work on, say, project B and we generate that report again, but now we're discarding all of the findings that were previously shown for project A. So we're wondering if we're going down the wrong track here, or one way that we could probably work around that is merge all of these reports together iteratively. And so, these are questions that have kind of come to mind for us. And I just wanted to kind of share this with the group here to see, does anybody have any thoughts on this? Are we going down the wrong rabbit hole altogether, or does anybody see value in what we're trying to do here? I suppose two examples or use cases where I think it might be useful to do this kind of thing is, if you've got a very, very large monorepo that's housing all of your projects and microservices and what have you, it might make sense to do this because it will reduce the overall time it'll take to analyze the changes that you've made, right? So there's, from a performance overhead, I think there's value there. And the second benefit might be that it makes you more efficient because you're only really zeroing in on or focusing on those changes that you've made rather than analyzing the entire repo. So that's kind of an overview of what we're trying to do, where we're at, some of the questions that have kind of bubbled up as part of this work. And does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I can sort of kick us off here. So monorepo support has been a struggle, to say the least. It's complicated. It's different with every single customer. The goals of what they're trying to do, how they organize, is all different. So I think this is one where it kind of just depends on what a customer is doing. But I think you're focused there on speed of scanning and the accuracy of the results is something that's very much top of mind for us. And I think fundamentally, the way that we do scanning today, we scan twice in a merge request. We try to do the comparative piece so that it's very cause and effect driven. We're not super great at that today, I will admit. Actually, some of the tracking vulnerability stuff that I mentioned before should help with some of that. And then when you merge your merge request, we of course scan the whole project again, and that's what feeds into our security dashboards. So I see these as sort of two concerns. You've got the developer experience, and that's where you want the very strong cause and effect. And you've got the security dashboards, which is very much what vulnerabilities are in this project's main base and potentially in production. And I see this as a filtering problem right now with the way we're scanning on the security dashboard piece. I should be able to filter into projects so that I can only look at the thing that I care about if I'm working in a monorepo. But in the developer experience, that's where you get into what you're describing here of, I didn't change anything anywhere else. So why am I seeing vulnerabilities from anywhere? And that's just sort of a fundamental way we do scanning today. It's interesting to hear that y'all are doing this analysis or this proof of concept. I didn't know about it, so I'm very interested to see the direction y'all are going. So any links to the analyzer or any discussions y'all are having, certainly happy to join those and take a look at those.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The engineers on the call have lots of thoughts.
Say, I do, and I'll speak unless engineers want to articulate before I ramble for a while.
Yeah, I just had a couple things to mention. Yeah, you're correct with how you interpreted what my demo showed. So it just does a blanket, just scans everything. I see quite a bit of value in what you're proposing. And I can think back to being a consultant in monorepos and would want the similar thing. The biggest gotcha that I see that you're going to run through without doing some work on our behalf, or likewise, is it has to do with how we see if something's been fixed. So if, and Lucas, you could, or Thomas, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but from the way I understand it, we have a list of vulnerabilities. If we get a report that is missing other vulnerabilities, then those will be marked as fixed, right? And that might be what you're running into. And in that case, we would need better support to be able to say, just scan these two, and then in that diff, it would have to make sure that it's looking at the locations of these files and it gets a little bit more complicated. But those comparison of those reports to knowing what's fixed, I think is going to probably be the biggest roadblock to this.
I think
I see a lot of value in it though.
Yeah, I think if you took just a very, very simple use case and a happy path where a team is only ever going to be working on a specific project as part of an MR, then that's fine. It's, this is a very straightforward thing. But where the complication comes in is if they're touching different parts of the repo as part of their work, if they're a multi-project team,
So like in the case of spot bugs, you could have a multi-module, let's say you have like a multi-module project. So your POM references a number of sub-modules. At that point, it's a bit difficult to determine scope there in terms of a change within a module could have a cross dependency between the different modules. So running a single one, it gets difficult to say this has no greater side effects there. If we could be certain that it didn't, then it would be possible to run like a subset of an analysis per branch. So maybe because the vulnerability dashboard, at least currently, is based entirely off the default branch, we could in theory do something like a sub-analysis of the change files for a feature branch, and then the pipeline for the default branch does an entire analysis. But again, it's just not it's fundamentally not the way it works currently. I think there's definitely discussion there, as Daniel said, about improving that or changing the way that currently works. But with the basic assumption now, it's all or nothing, simply because it gives us the best understanding of whether there's side effects in other parts of the code base.
Right. I'll add on from a few different points of view, and it's going to be complementary to what you've heard. So I heard a few things that you mentioned. The big one, scope of control for an individual team being a subset of what was there. That I agree with Taylor. That is a filtering problem on what we currently have today for vulnerability dashboards and those results. As far as whether or not, and getting outside of spot bugs specifically and into a SAST tooling generically type of question, is a per directory approach correct? That depends on how the tool works. If the tool is working off of an abstract syntax tree and is working its way through how code and how data perpetuates itself through an application, then having partial compilation, partial understanding of that is going to be problematic without understanding what the code paths look like throughout the entire application itself. The other aspect of this is when we start talking about monorepos or mono projects or multi-project support within a repository. There's a number of reasons why they are set up. The only technical reason or that would drive someone to this particular setup that I am aware of and that I have seen is in a microservice architecture where there is a common or central artifact or project that is required by every single microservice that is deployed, that must be kept in sync every single time that one directory is updated, which would then spawn off multiple CDs to happen as a result of this. So the per directory approach in that particular case would spawn everywhere. If there is a weakness within that common directory, it is going to be a weakness that has manifested itself everywhere to which it was deployed. The other parts of this that are worth noting, and is an underlying assumption that I think we too frequently forget as an organization, is that there are two things that will move over the course of a project's lifecycle. One is the code itself and what vulnerabilities are there and what capabilities are there and how it is refactored. The other is in the capabilities of the analyzer, in that it will be able to detect new things that we were blind to previously, which will uncover weaknesses that have been there, but we could not see before. So even though it is unrelated to the changes that are there, it is a weakness and a risk that we now can see, and is worth something that is calling out. So it's nuance. It's an interesting question. It gets, I get stuck in the complexity of it, and I will admit that freely.
Yeah, it's an idea that is certainly not going to be applicable to all teams or organizations, but it's an idea nonetheless that we thought might have merit. But as I say, once we got into it and we started thinking about how the reports were generated, how the findings were distilled and brought to the surface, then it was like, okay, actually, in practice, this might be a bit misleading.
It's interesting to approach it from an efficiency standpoint. Where I think you're trying to get at is developer efficiency. Yeah, you're talking about cycle time, but you're also trying to hint at what are the vulnerabilities that were in the scope of the changes that I just put forward, which is an area of improvement, certainly. There's some ideas that we have around that, but it's not something that we have had the opportunity to mature on to this point.
Yeah.
And a little bit. Yeah.
A question here is, are we trying to solve a fundamental shift in the way that we do this when maybe a UI filter is all that's needed? Like maybe to more directly put it, if in the merge request, you could just filter by directory, would that solve the customer pain point here?
I was Taylor, I was just going to say that. It's already been said. That's a great point. I think filtering would, I think there's a lot of value in being able to filter. If you're just to be able to kind of filter out all the noise that you're not necessarily interested in, right? Definitely, I think there's value in that. How that would look like and what that would look like in an MR, I'm not entirely
and that
sure.
it breaks down very quickly. I had the same question, how do you filter that on the dashboard? Now, with that said, I think we have an interesting example of where this kind of works too. If you think about our review apps, like when I make a change to our handbook page, most of the time it can determine what page I changed. And when I click the view app button, it takes me exactly to the page that it changed, except when it doesn't. And then you're kind of screwed and you have to figure out where was the change? How do I get to the file? But at the same time, it also solves this problem where, but also there are outstanding changes that me changing something with a CSS class will break the front page. And so being able to go and see those things is also something that like, we have to be careful on how we change the way the analyzers work, because if there is an unintentional impact that you make in your project that now creates a vulnerability in the other project, like you don't want to miss that. And I would be afraid that if we were only scanning one directory, that you would naturally, we just would not ever know that case. So this is where I think filtering, if it were smart enough to be able to like, hey, you only change things here, like here's that default view. And then like, oh no, you introduced a new thing here. Like we kind of need to be a little smarter about that.
Yeah. It's, we're at this idea stage. So it's, and we're raising this with you early, these ideas. There might be merit to these ideas, there may not be. But I think filtering definitely sounds like it would help a lot for this particular scenario. The other kind of benefit that I mentioned is, if you consider a very, very large monorepo, large in size, whether it be, the actual size or just the sheer number of different projects, there may be a benefit in doing this so as to reduce cycle time, right? Not scanning every single project. That's a harder one to address, I think, but that's another benefit there.
It is something we've got to care about, because when we hear customers complain about our scan length time, it's almost always a monorepository that's gigantic.
Yeah.
This is the case where that happens and we have to worry about scanning time. Again, it brings up that same problem though of, do you want something fast or do you want something complete? And you can't have
yeah.
both of those things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what I'll do is we'll share the project with you and some of the work that we've done and you know, take it from there.
Very cool. Thank you. All right.
Okay, thank you.
We have a couple minutes left. And that's the end of the written agenda. Is there anything else folks would like to talk about while we're all here? Hearing nothing. Thanks, everybody. This was a great discussion. We very much appreciate you being here. We'll see everybody here, same bat time, same bat channel next week. See you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.